Ethan Cole had never come home at 3 in the afternoon. Not in the decade since he'd built his tech empire from a cramped studio apartment in a dream too stubborn to die. Not in the 6 years since his sons were born. Not even on the day the company hit its first billion in valuation, when champagne flowed through the executive suite and his CFO suggested they all take the rest of the week off. Work was the architecture of his life, the one thing that made sense when nothing else did. But today his meeting canceled. A merger with a Singapore-based firm collapsed when their CEO suffered a heart attack mid-negotiation. Ethan's calendar sat empty for 4 hours, a white space that felt accusatory. His assistant Jennifer kept glancing at him like he might shatter if she spoke too loudly. She finally suggested he go home, rest, maybe see his boys for once during daylight hours. The words landed with the weight of an indictment. He parked the black Mercedes outside the mansion instead of pulling into the 6-car garage. His hands stayed locked on the steering wheel, knuckles bone white against Italian leather. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass doors, custom-made, imported from Germany, worth more than most families earned in a year, he could see into the backyard. The manicured lawn stretched like a painting, every blade of grass cut to precisely 3 inches. The granite fountain imported from Tuscany. The oak tree, older than the house itself, planted a century ago when this hillside was nothing but cattle ranches and gold rush dreams. Late October had painted the world in shades of amber and rust. Leaves drifted down from the oak's branches, spinning lazy spirals in the afternoon light. Golden hour, photographer called it. That slant of sun that made everything look like memory, like the past reaching forward to touch the present. Beneath that tree sat Maya with his 3 sons. Carson's head rested in her lap, his small body curled against her, like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Tyler had both arms wrapped around her waist, face pressed into her side. Noah leaned into her shoulder, his slate frame tucked under her arm. She was reading to them from an old book, pages yellowed with age. Not a children's story, not even a regular book. A recipe book, battered and stained, held together with what looked like love and desperate hope. Her voice drifted through the glass, too faint to make out words. But all 3 boys were laughing at something on the page, their faces tilted up toward hers like flowers following the sun. The afternoon light fell across them in golden streams, leaves spiraling down around them like blessings from above. Ethan had commissioned photographers for family portraits twice, professional shoots with perfect lighting and coordinated outfits that cost thousands of dollars. The results hung in silver frames throughout the house, looking exactly like what they were. Expensive proof of a family that existed on paper but not in practice. This moment under the oak tree deserved a frame, except Ethan wasn't in it. Maya swept her hair back from her face, laughing at something Carson said. The movement exposed the curve of her neck, the delicate shell of her ear. And there, just behind it, a crescent moon birthmark caught the light. Small, distinctive. The kind of mark that genetics scattered randomly through bloodlines like dice, thrown by an indifferent god. Ethan's breath stopped. He'd seen that mark before. Every morning when Carson climbed into bed with him on the rare weekends he was home. Every bath time when he happened to be present. Every photo and video stored on his phone that he never had time to look at properly. Carson had the same mark, same ear, same placement, same crescent curve like a fingernail pressed into wax. Maya's hand moved to Carson's hair, fingers threading through the soft brown strands with a tenderness that looked like pain wearing a smile. Her touch lingered, careful and deliberate, as if she was memorizing the texture, the weight, the reality of him. Something in Ethan's chest cracked open, not clean, not surgical, more like old wood splitting under pressure, the sound of something held together too long finally giving way. When had his home become a place where he was the outsider? When had a stranger learned to love his children better than he ever had? And why did that crescent moon feel like an accusation written in flesh? The foundation of Ethan Cole's empire rested on control. Every variable mapped, every outcome projected, every risk calculated down to the decimal point. He'd built a company that anticipated market shifts before they happened, that read consumer behavior like prophets read entrails. Success wasn't luck. It was preparation meeting, opportunity meeting, relentless execution. 4 years ago, control betrayed him, Sarah had been the one variable he couldn't predict. College sweethearts who'd survived long distance, career changes, the brutal pressure of a startup that consumed 18-hour days and left him hollowed out and running on espresso and ambition. She'd been his anchor, the voice that reminded him why any of it mattered. They already had Carson at 2 years old, Tyler barely walking at 1. The pregnancy with Noah should have been routine. Third child, experienced mother, excellent prenatal care, every checkup perfect. Every ultrasound showed a healthy baby boy, every metric within normal range. Until it wasn't. Placental abruption during delivery, hemorrhaging that turned the delivery room into a war zone. Doctors shouting medical terminology that became white noise against Sarah's weakening pulse. Someone, he couldn't remember who, couldn't remember anything except the rushing sound in his ears, made him choose. Save your wife or save your son. Ethan froze. The CEO who made million-dollar decisions before breakfast, who'd fired executives and pivoted company strategy and negotiated with venture capitalists circling like sharks, couldn't form words. Couldn't think. Couldn't choose between the woman he'd loved for 15 years and the son he'd never met. Sarah chose for him. Her hand found his, slippery with sweat and blood, and squeezed with what remained of her strength. Save our baby. 3 words. Then the monitor's flatline scream. Noah lived. Sarah didn't. The doctors congratulated him on his healthy son, while his wife's body cooled under a sheet 3 rooms away. Someone handed him the baby, pink and screaming and alive, and Ethan couldn't make himself look. Couldn't make himself feel anything except the certainty that he'd murdered his wife by wanting too much, by building a family like it was another acquisition to add to his portfolio. The guilt metastasized. Every time he looked at Noah, he saw the choice he'd failed to make, the life that cost another life. He hired nannies within a week. Professional, vetted, rotated on strict schedules so nobody got too attached, so nobody became irreplaceable. He threw himself back into work because work made sense. Work had clear metrics. Work didn't ask him to feel things he'd locked away in compartments labeled later and never and when it stops hurting. 4 years. He'd been running for 4 years. Now he sat in his car outside his own home, watching a woman he barely knew love his children with an intensity that carved him hollow. The boys had lost their mother. He'd made sure they'd never need another one. Professional care, excellent education, every material advantage. That was enough. That had to be enough. Except it wasn't. He could see that now, watching them under the oak tree. See it in the way Carson relaxed completely in Maya's presence. The anxiety that usually kept him rigid and watchful melting away. See it in Tyler's unself-conscious laughter, the way he buried his face in her side without fear of rejection. See it in Noah's rare smile, the one that appeared so infrequently that Ethan sometimes forgot his youngest son's face could light up like that. They needed what he'd stolen from them, a mother's love, the thing he'd sworn they could live without because he couldn't bear to let anyone close enough to take Sarah's place. Maya wasn't trying to take anyone's place. She was just filling the void he'd left, one afternoon at a time, one story from a recipe book, one gentle touch to hair that needed cutting. Ethan's phone buzzed. The office. Another emergency that wasn't really an emergency, just people unable to function without his constant presence. He silenced it. For the first time in a decade, he silenced his phone and sat watching his children learn what love looked like from someone who showed up. 6 months ago, Mrs. Helen Foster announced her retirement. She'd been with Ethan for a decade, managing his household with military efficiency. She'd worked for him before the boys were born, before Sarah died, through every nanny rotation and domestic crisis. He trusted her completely, which meant he barely thought about her. The retirement came while he was in Singapore. Helen handled her own replacement, brought in someone from an agency she'd worked with for years. By the time Ethan returned, jet-lagged and running on caffeine and adrenaline, Maya Sullivan was simply there. He'd seen her maybe 3 times in 6 months. Always in passing, a glimpse into the hallway, a figure in the kitchen when he came down for coffee at 5 in the morning before the rest of the house woke. They communicated through text messages and notes left on the granite counter. Instructions about the boys' schedules, dietary requirements, upcoming appointments. She followed directions precisely. The house ran smoothly. The boys seemed content. That was all he'd needed to know. Now he needed to know everything. Maya Chen. That was her real name, Helen had mentioned once. Or maybe she'd said Maya Sullivan. Ethan couldn't remember, hadn't been paying attention, had been reading emails while Helen talked. The memory shamed him now. What he did remember, the house started smelling different after Maya arrived. Not the sterile clean of professional services, but something warmer. Cinnamon and vanilla and butter. Fresh bread baking. Cookies cooling on racks. The scent of a home instead of a facility. The boys started talking about meals. Carson would mention the cinnamon rolls on Monday mornings, how Maya let him help roll the dough even though it took twice as long and made 3 times the mess. Tyler described the chocolate chip pancakes shaped like animals, how she'd teach him to flip them without breaking. Noah, who rarely spoke about anything, once drew a picture of apple tarts and labeled it for Miss Maya in careful block letters. Ethan had assumed she was just good at her job. Excellent even. Worth the premium salary he paid without questioning. He'd never looked at her properly. Never wondered about the person behind the efficient execution of her duties. Never asked where she'd learned to bake, or why she read recipe books to children like they were adventure stories, or what put that expression in her eyes when she looked at Carson. The expression he'd just witnessed through the glass. The one that looked like grief and joy braided together so tightly they became indistinguishable. That birthmark, that impossible genetic coincidence. Ethan finally released the steering wheel. Blood rushed back into his fingers, painful and necessary. He needed information. Facts. Data to make sense of the pattern forming in his mind, the one that whispered impossible things about coincidence and fate, and the kind of cosmic joke that would bring a stranger into his home who fit so perfectly that his children bloomed under her care. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't used in 2 years. Douglas and Associates, private investigation firm, discreet, thorough, expensive enough that they never ask questions. The call connected on the second ring. I need background on someone. Everything you can find. Go deep. The investigator's voice held no curiosity, no judgment. That was why Ethan paid premium rates. Name? Maya Sullivan, age approximately 28. Employed in my household for 6 months. I want to know everything before that. Employment history, education, family, social media presence, any gaps you can find. Timeline? 1 week. The investigator paused, likely calculating resources and overtime. Then, I'll have something by Thursday. Ethan ended the call and sat in his car, watching the tableau under the oak tree. Maya closed the recipe book and said something that made all 3 boys groan dramatically. Probably time for homework or baths or one of the other domestic rituals that structured their days. She stood, brushing leaves from her jeans, and the boys scrambled up with her. Carson grabbed her hand. Tyler wrapped both arms around her waist, making her stagger and laugh. Noah simply pressed against her side, quiet and constant. They moved toward the house together, a constellation of 4 people who belonged to each other in ways Ethan had never managed to achieve with his own children. He waited until they disappeared inside before getting out of the car. The front door felt foreign under his hand, his own home, his own lock, his own custom-made handle, and it felt like trespassing. Inside, their voices echoed from somewhere deeper in the house. The boys chattering, Maya's lower tones weaving between them. Someone laughed. Tyler probably, he had the loudest laugh. Someone else asked a question. Maya answered with patience that sounded genuine rather than professional. Ethan went upstairs to his office and closed the door. The silence felt safer. He could control silence. His computer hummed to life. The desktop showed a screensaver of the boys from 2 years ago, professionally photographed, coordinated in matching outfits they'd never worn before or since. They looked like strangers playing the part of his sons. Ethan opened a secure folder and pulled up the security camera feeds. He'd installed the system after Sarah died. Paranoia dressed up as caution. Cameras covered every angle of the house except the bedrooms and bathrooms. He could monitor everything from his phone, from his office, from anywhere in the world. He told himself it was for safety. Really, it was because he couldn't bear to be present, so he'd found a way to watch without participating. Now he scrolled back through the footage. 6 months of Maya with his children, playing back in silent, high-definition clarity. The cameras had no audio. He watched her life with his sons like a film with the sound stripped out, every gesture and expression magnified by the absence of words. Morning routines. Maya in the kitchen before sunrise, hands working dough with practiced efficiency. The movements looked meditative, purposeful, the actions of someone who understood that baking was more than following recipes. Carson appeared first, drawn by the smell, climbing onto a stool to watch. She handed him an egg. He cracked it, fumbled, got shell in the mixture. Maya simply smiled and showed him how to fish it out with the other half of the shell. Patience incarnate. Tyler stumbled in next, hair wild from sleep. Maya had pancakes going on the griddle, flipping them with wrist flicks that looked like small magic. She shaped one into a lopsided turtle. Tyler's face lit up. She made another. Better this time. Something that might have been a dragon. The boy bounced on his toes, vibrating with joy. Noah drifted in last, silent as always. Maya didn't push him to talk, didn't force interaction. Just squeezed his shoulder and set out paper and markers so he could draw while she cooked. The boy drew, unbothered by his brother's noise, secure in the knowledge that she'd carved out space for him to exist without performance. Homework sessions. Carson struggled with subtraction, face scrunched in frustration that bordered on tears. Maya didn't lecture or pressure. She pulled out a bag of chocolate chips and demonstrated borrowing with candy, letting him eat the ones they didn't need. The concept clicked. Carson's face transformed, achievement replacing anxiety. Tyler's reading lessons. The boy had trouble focusing, letters jumping and swapping places in ways that made him furious with himself. Maya brought out picture books and let him tell her the story from the illustrations, building confidence before tackling the words. She made mistakes on purpose so he could correct her. Tyler caught everyone, his voice growing stronger with each correction. Noah's quiet afternoons, the youngest son drawing while Maya worked nearby, not hovering, just present. The boy would occasionally hold up a picture for her approval. She'd examine it seriously, commenting on color choices and composition, like he was Picasso showing off a masterpiece. Noah would return to his work, content. But it was the moments between activities that hollowed Ethan out. The casual touches, Maya ruffling Carson's hair as she passed, her hand on Tyler's shoulder, steadying him. The way she'd pull Noah into unexpected hugs, the kind that said, "I see you," louder than words. The way she looked at them, especially Carson. Ethan rewound that footage, watched it frame by frame. Maya's expression when Carson wasn't looking. Something raw and hungry, desperate and tender all at once. The look of someone memorizing details because she feared they'd be taken away. People didn't love other people's children like that. Not hired help, no matter how professional. Not unless there was a reason carved from something deeper than employment contracts and hourly wages. That birthmark burned in his mind. Crescent moon behind the ear. Genetic marker passed through bloodlines like messages in DNA. Carson had it. Maya had it. Coincidence? Every instinct Ethan had honed over a decade of business, reading people, spotting patterns, identifying threats before they materialize, screamed that nothing about Maya Sullivan was coincidence. Thursday arrived wrapped in coastal fog. October sliding toward November, the air turning sharp enough to promise winter. Ethan had barely slept for 3 days, running on coffee and the kind of focus that came from fear wearing the mask of productivity. His assistant asked if he was feeling well. His CFO suggested he take a vacation. The board noticed his distraction in their quarterly review and exchanged glances that meant trouble. Let them worry. He had bigger concerns. The call came at 2 in the afternoon. Douglas himself, not an associate. That meant the findings were significant enough to warrant the senior partner's attention. Ethan took it in an empty conference room, 40 stories above San Francisco, looking out at a city he'd conquered but never really seen. "We have a situation, Mr. Cole." Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. "Go on." Maya Sullivan didn't exist before 3 years ago. The employment history is legitimate. References check out. Tax records are clean. But before that, there's nothing. No digital footprint, no previous addresses, no education records matching her stated credentials. She materialized fully formed at age 25. Ethan stared at the skyline, watching fog roll between buildings like smoke. What did you find? The investigator's voice held the studied neutrality of someone delivering bad news professionally. When we dug deeper, we found Maya Chen. No Sullivan, lived in Portland, worked as a waitress while attending Portland State University part-time. Unremarkable life until 6 years ago, when she registered with Elite Reproductive Services. The words hit like bullets, each one finding its mark with surgical precision. Elite Reproductive Services, the agency Ethan had used. The agency that had provided him with 3 anonymous surrogates, 3 separate contracts, 3 sons born at intervals that made sense on his timeline for building a family without the complications of marriage or emotional entanglement. She registered as a gestational surrogate, Douglas continued. 1 pregnancy, 1 successful birth, payment of $80,000. Then she vanished from their records, moved to California, constructed a new identity, eventually became Maya Sullivan. Which child? Ethan's voice came out raw, stripped of the polish he usually wore like armor. Records are sealed, but based on timing, your oldest son. Carson. The conference room tilted. Ethan sat down hard in the nearest chair, phone pressed so tightly to his ear that it ached. Mr. Cole, should I continue? Continue. Ms. Chen had a brother, Michael Chen, 2 years older, diagnosed with glioblastoma, brain cancer, 7 years ago. He underwent surgery and treatment funded by, we can assume, his sister's surrogacy payment. He lived 6 years post-diagnosis. Died 3 months ago at Providence Portland Medical Center. 3 months ago, right around when Maya appeared in Ethan's household, hired by Helen Foster, sliding into his life like she'd been waiting for an opening. How did she find us? That's unclear. But hospital records show Michael Chen was in and out of Providence, Portland extensively. They have a pediatric wing. If you or your sons were there for any reason, it's possible she recognized you. Or the boys. The report shows she was at the hospital the week before she moved to California. Timeline matches when you would have been visiting your pediatrician for routine checkups. Cosmic coincidence or cosmic joke? Ethan couldn't decide which was worse. Is there anything else I should know? Douglas paused, the kind of silence that preceded revelations better delivered face to face. She changed her name legally 3 years ago, filed in Alameda County. Maya Chen became Maya Sullivan. The application lists her reason as fresh start following family tragedy. No criminal record, no outstanding warrants, no red flags beyond the identity change and the surrogacy connection. And the connection to my family? Did she target us specifically? That's not something I can prove from documents alone, but the pattern suggests intent. She knew who you were. She knew which child was hers. She engineered a position in your household through someone you trusted. Helen. Mrs. Foster, who'd managed his life for a decade. Had she known? Had she been part of this? What's your recommendation? Ethan's voice sounded distant, like someone else was using his throat. Legally, she violated the surrogacy contract. Those agreements explicitly prohibit future contact. You could pursue action through the agency, possibly involve law enforcement for fraud related to the false identity. But, Mr. Cole, but? The investigator's voice softened almost imperceptibly. Your sons appear to be thriving under her care. Any action you take will disrupt their lives significantly. Sometimes the legal response isn't the correct response. Ethan ended the call without reply. The conference room felt like a cage. Glass walls looking out at freedom he'd spent years building but never enjoying. Carson was hers. The boy who'd lost his mother before he took his first breath. The boy Ethan had held exactly once in the hospital, squirming and new, before handing him to a nurse because looking at him hurt too much. The boy a woman had carried for 9 months, felt move inside her, delivered and held for 30 seconds before contracts and cash and clinical detachment stripped her of every right to call him hers, and she'd found her way back. Created a new identity, infiltrated his household, inserted herself into his son's lives with the precision of someone executing a long-planned operation. The rage came first, clean and simple. Betrayal, deception, violation of every boundary that protected his family from chaos and unpredictability. But underneath, something more complicated twisted. Maya had given his son something he couldn't. Presence, joy. The kind of uncomplicated love that didn't need legal documents or blood tests to validate itself. If he fired her, Carson would be devastated. Tyler would cry. Noah might stop speaking entirely, retreating into the silence that swallowed him whenever the world proved too much. If he kept her, he'd be complicit in her deception, living with the knowledge that his oldest son's biological mother was under his roof every day, loving the child she'd sold, playing a role that should have been Sarah's, but never would be. Ethan drove home in rush hour traffic, barely seeing the roads. Other cars were obstacles to navigate around, problems to solve with turn signals and lane changes. He made it to the house by 5:30, earlier than he'd been home in years. The smell hit him first. Garlic and herbs, something baking that involved butter and flour and care. Real cooking, not the prepared meals previous housekeepers had arranged on plates with garnishes that looked pretty and tasted like cardboard. He followed the scent to the kitchen. Maya stood at the stove, wooden spoon in hand, teaching Tyler how to stir without splashing. Noah sat at the table arranging napkins and silverware in careful geometric patterns. Carson leaned against Maya's side, chattering about something that happened at school, his voice rising and falling with the cadence of a child who knew the adult listening actually cared about the answer. The domestic scene was so thoroughly normal that Ethan forgot for a moment why he was there. It looked like a family. It looked like home. Then Maya glanced up and saw him. All the color drained from her face. The wooden spoon clattered to the stovetop, sauce splattering. Her eyes met his, and in that instant of contact, Ethan saw recognition, fear, the understanding that he knew. She knew that he knew. Somehow, without words, the truth stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. "Mr. Cole," her voice came out steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I didn't expect you home so early." Ethan kept his voice level, controlled, the businessman negotiating a hostile takeover. "I need to speak with you. Boys, go wash up for dinner." "But Dad," Carson started. "Now please." The boys heard something in his tone that killed their protests. They filed out, casting worried glances over their shoulders. Carson lingered longest, looking between Ethan and Maya like he was trying to solve an equation with missing variables. The kitchen fell silent except for the sauce bubbling on the stove. Maya turned off the burner and faced him. Her shoulders squared, chin lifted, preparing for battle. But underneath the defiance, that fear remained. The kind that came from knowing you were about to lose everything. "Not here," Ethan's voice dropped lower. "My office after they're asleep." Maya nodded once, sharp and military. "I'll put them to bed. I'll do it." The words surprised them both. "I'll put them to bed tonight." Ethan had forgotten what his children's bedtime routine looked like. Or maybe he'd never known. The nannies handled it, the rotating cast of professionals who clocked in and out on strict schedules. He signed the checks and assumed it was handled. Now he stood in Carson's room, the oldest boy in pajamas covered in dinosaurs that were probably too young for a 6-year-old, but that Carson loved anyway, and realized he had no idea what came next. "Story?" Carson suggested hopefully. "Miss Maya usually reads 3. "One tonight," Ethan said, hearing how that sounded even as he said it. Stingy, inadequate. But Carson negotiated like a tiny lawyer. 2 and a song? They settled on 2 stories. No song. Ethan read from a book about dragons that Carson had apparently memorized, because the boy corrected his pronunciation twice and questioned his interpretation of the dragon's motivations. "You sound different when you read, Dad." "Different how?" Miss Maya makes voices. "You just read words." The observation landed like criticism, accurate and damning. Ethan finished the second story, kissed Carson's forehead, when had he last done that, and moved to Tyler's room. Tyler refused to wear his pajama bottoms, insisted on sleeping in his soccer uniform, then made getting into bed some kind of game with rules Ethan didn't understand. They ended up in a water fight during toothbrushing that left both of them soaked and Tyler giggling. In Noah's room, the youngest son was already in bed, watching Ethan with those solemn eyes that saw too much. Noah didn't resist when Ethan pulled the covers up, didn't complain or negotiate, just watched. Finally, quietly, "Why are you here?" Ethan blinked. "I live here. I'm your father." "I know." Noah's voice was barely above a whisper. "But why are you here?" The question carved through pretense and excuses. Why was Ethan here in his son's bedroom, participating in a routine that should have been familiar but felt like visiting a foreign country where he didn't speak the language? Because I should have been here all along. Noah considered this. Then, is Miss Maya leaving? No. The word came out too fast, too desperate. Then, more carefully, I hope not. The boy nodded and closed his eyes, accepting this the way he accepted everything, with a resignation that hurt to witness. Ethan made it downstairs by 9:30, exhausted in ways that board meetings and hostile negotiations never achieved. Parenting was harder than running a company. The variables were human, unpredictable, armed with questions he couldn't answer and needs he barely understood. Maya had cleaned the kitchen. Coffee sat in the pot, 2 mugs beside it. The gesture was absurdly polite given the confrontation waiting for them. She stood when he entered his office, positioned in one of the leather chairs across from his desk like someone awaiting sentencing. Her hands were folded in her lap, but they shook. Ethan didn't sit. He placed a folder on the desk between them. The investigator's report, printed and bound, heavy with implications. Maya Chen. His voice came out quiet, stripped of the anger he'd expected to feel. That's your real name, isn't it? She closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them, the fear had transformed into something harder. Defiance mixed with resignation. Yes, the admission hung in the air between them, changing everything and nothing. You carried one of my sons 6 years ago through elite reproductive services. Yes, you signed a contract that explicitly prohibited any future contact. You gave up all parental rights. You were paid $80,000. Yes to all of it. Her voice was steady now, almost challenging. Are you going to call the police? Ethan finally sat, suddenly exhausted. I'm trying to decide. What I can't figure out is why. What were you hoping to accomplish by lying your way into my house? Maya's composure cracked. Tears welled but didn't fall. I just wanted to see him. See who? The name came out like a confession and a prayer. Carson. There it was. The truth he'd already known, confirmed in 2 syllables. Confirmation of what the birthmark had screamed, what his instincts had whispered, what the investigator had documented in clean clinical prose. How did you find us? Maya's eyes went bright with unshed tears. 3 months ago, I was at Providence Portland Medical Center. My brother Michael, his final stages. I spent every night there. She paused, swallowed hard, continued. I was in the emergency room one night around 2 a.m., exhausted, probably delirious. You came through with all 3 boys, some kind of checkup or emergency I never found out. Ethan remembered that night. Carson had spiked a fever that wouldn't break. Tyler had fallen and possibly broken his wrist, and the regular pediatrician wasn't available. He'd loaded all 3 into the car and driven through rain to the hospital, stressed and terrified in ways he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Carson turned his head. Maya's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I saw the birthmark, the crescent moon behind his ear. She touched her own ear, the gesture unconscious. I have the same one, same ear, same placement. It's rare. Genetic. 1 in 10,000. Ethan thought about statistics, probability, the cold mathematics of DNA inheritance. The impossible odds of seeing your genetic marker on a stranger's child in a hospital emergency room at 2 in the morning. I knew immediately he was mine. So you tracked me down, created a fake identity, infiltrated my household. I know it was wrong. Maya leaned forward, urgent now. I know I violated the contract. I know you could destroy me for this. The tears finally fell, tracking down her cheeks. But I carried him for 9 months, Mr. Cole. I felt him move inside me, felt him hiccup and kick and turn. I held him for exactly 30 seconds after he was born before they took him away. Before I signed papers that said I'd never see him again, never know if he was okay, never be allowed to love him. Her voice broke. For 6 years I've wondered if he was happy, if he was healthy, if he felt the hole where a mother should be. The accusation landed harder because she didn't mean it as one. Just stating facts, the terrible arithmetic of loss. He doesn't have a hole. Ethan's voice came out sharper than intended. He has everything he needs. Maya stood and Ethan saw that her hands weren't shaking anymore. Does he? Really? Because from what I've seen, he has things, expensive things, educational toys and private tutors, and a beautiful house that's more museum than home. She paused, gathering courage for the killing blow. But when was the last time you read him a story, Mr. Cole? Helped him with his homework? Just sat with him while he talked about his day? The words were surgical strikes, each one finding its target with devastating accuracy. You hire people to love your children for rump you. Maya's voice didn't rise, didn't need to. The truth was weapon enough. I'm just the latest in a line of replacements. Professional affection on a schedule. The difference is, her voice dropped to a whisper. I actually do love them. Not because you pay me, because I can't help it. Ethan rose to meet her, anger finally breaking through. I'm their father. Legally, biologically. Yes, Maya didn't back down. But being a parent requires more than contracts and biology. It requires showing up. The silence between them stretched taut. Ethan could fire her with a phone call, could have her arrested for fraud by morning, could erase her from his children's lives with the efficiency he brought to eliminating underperforming divisions and redundant personnel. But the image wouldn't leave him. Carson's face in her lap, relaxed and happy in ways Ethan rarely saw. Tyler's laughter, unguarded and bright. Noah's quiet contentment, the way he'd curled against her side like he'd found something he hadn't known he needed. I'm scared. The admission came from somewhere deep, breaking through years of careful control. I couldn't protect my wife, couldn't save her. The doctors made me choose and I froze. Maya's expression shifted, hardening into something that looked like understanding. Do you know why I use surrogates? Ethan's voice was raw now, stripped of polish. Why I wanted children but not the complications of marriage or partnership. He forced himself to continue. Because my wife died giving birth to Noah. Placental abruption. Hemorrhaging. They made me choose between saving her or saving the baby. I froze. Couldn't decide. Sarah decided for me. She said save our baby, and then she died while I stood there holding her hand and being completely useless. The room felt too small, air too thick, so yes, I hired people. Because every time I looked at my sons, I saw what loving them cost. I saw Sarah dying because I wanted a family, wanted children, wanted more than I had any right to ask for. Maya's face showed something like grief. Mr. Cole, he cut her off. Now you're telling me I'm still failing them. That even with all the money, all the resources, all the careful planning, I'm giving them things instead of myself. She didn't deny it. Sometimes the truth was just the truth, no matter how it cut. Why did you sign the contract? Ethan asked, suddenly needing to understand. If you loved him, if you wanted to keep him, why sell him? Maya sank back into the chair. My brother Michael, brain cancer, glioblastoma, terminal diagnosis. She stared at her hands. He was 25. I was 22. We had nothing, no insurance, no savings, no family with money. The surgery cost $85,000. We had $2,400. Her voice went flat, reciting facts that still hurt. Elite Reproductive Services offered $80,000 for one pregnancy. 9 months of my life for 6 years of his. That was the math. That was the choice. Did it work? Ethan's voice was gentler now. He lived 6 more years. Good years, mostly. We traveled when he had the strength. Saw the Grand Canyon, visited Portland's Japanese garden every cherry blossom season, ate at food trucks, and laughed about stupid things. Maya's tears fell freely now. He died 3 months ago. Same week I saw Carson at the hospital. Like Michael's last gift was showing me that my sacrifice meant something. That the baby I gave away was loved and cared for and alive. The parallel losses sat between them, heavy and undeniable. 2 people who'd made impossible choices, who'd traded pieces of themselves for others' survival, who'd spent years wondering if the price had been worth paying. I came here to see if Carson was happy. Maya's voice was barely audible. I thought I'd watch from a distance, make sure he was okay, then disappear. I didn't plan to stay. Didn't plan to fall in love with Carson, with all of them. Maya looked up, meeting his eyes directly. Tyler with his energy and his struggling reading and his terrible jokes. Noah with his silence and his art, and his need for someone to just be present without demanding conversation. Her voice broke. They became mine, Mr. Cole, not because I gave birth to one of them, but because I showed up every day and fell in love with who they are. The truth settled over the room like snow, covering everything in white silence. Ethan couldn't argue, couldn't defend his absence or his choices, could only sit in his own office, in his own house, and face the reality that a woman who'd lied her way into his life had become more essential to his children than he'd ever managed to be. If I fire you, they'll be devastated. I know. If I keep you, I'm complicit in fraud. I know. If I report you to the agency, you'll be destroyed financially, possibly face criminal charges. Maya nodded. I know that too. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Do you want Carson back? Legally? Is that what this is about? No. The answer came fast and firm. He's yours. You're raising him. He calls you dad. I couldn't take that from him or from you. Then what do you want? Maya was quiet for so long Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. I don't know anymore. I thought I knew when I came here. I thought I could watch from a distance, be satisfied with glimpses. She wiped her eyes, but then I started taking care of them, started teaching them and feeding them and loving them, and now I don't know how to leave. But I also don't know how to stay. The admission hung between them, honest and raw. Two people who didn't know what they were doing, trying to navigate terrain with no map and no guide. Ethan heard himself say the words before he'd fully formed the thought. I don't know what to do. It was possibly the first time in his adult life he'd admitted uncertainty out loud. The CEO who always had answers, who projected confidence like armor, admitting he was lost. Maya looked at him with something like recognition. I don't either. They sat in silence while coffee cooled in untouched mugs and snow began to fall outside the window. Somewhere above them, three boys slept, unaware their world was reorganizing itself around truths too complicated for simple resolutions. The question remained, unanswered and unanswerable in the space of one night. How do you build a family from broken pieces? How do you love children you don't know how to reach? How do you forgive deceptions born from desperation? How do you move forward when every path leads through pain? Ethan didn't have answers, neither did Maya. They just had the present moment, the cooling coffee, the falling snow, and three children who needed them to figure it out. Morning arrived gray and cold, December pressing against the windows. Ethan hadn't left his office. Maya had disappeared to the guest house sometime after midnight without another word exchanged. The coffee in his mug had gone stone cold hours ago, untouched except for the first sip that had tasted like surrender. The kitchen was already warm when he descended at 6. Maya stood at the counter, hands buried in dough, kneading with mechanical precision. Flour dusted her forearms. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. Neither acknowledged the other until the rhythmic press and fold of her hands slowed, then stopped. We need to talk before the boys wake up. She nodded, wiped her hands on a towel, and sat at the breakfast nook. The intimacy of the space felt wrong after last night's office confrontation, but maybe that was the point. Families worked out their disasters in kitchens, not behind executive desks. I can't fire you. Ethan kept his voice level, controlled. The boys need you, but I can't pretend everything's normal either. Maya's face remained carefully blank, waiting. So here's what I'm proposing. A deal. Not employment, something else. She finally looked up, wary. What kind of deal? The words came faster than he'd planned, like he'd been rehearsing them all night. No more lies. You use your real name, real history, everything on record. You're not his mother legally. Carson is mine. That doesn't change. But you teach me how to be the father they need. I learned to show up, not just provide. We co-parent. For how long? 6 months. Trial period. Then we reassess. Maya's fingers twisted the kitchen towel, white knuckles in doubt. And if it doesn't work, then you leave quietly. No fight, no drama. I won't hurt them more than necessary by dragging it out. The timer dinged. Cinnamon rolls ready. The batch sheet started at 5 a.m. while sleeplessness carved her hollow. She pulled them from the oven, golden and perfect, the scent flooding the kitchen with false comfort. If I stay, I need boundaries. She set the pan down carefully, too carefully. Guest house, not main house. Professional distance in public. And if you decide I'm a threat, you're not a threat. The certainty in his voice surprised them both. You don't know that. Maya turned finally, meeting his eyes. I infiltrated your home under false pretenses. I violated a contract that explicitly forbade contact. For all you know, I could be planning to take Carson legally. Are you? No, the word came out fierce. But you only have my word, and my word hasn't been worth much lately. Ethan extended his hand across the table, formal as a contract signing. 6 months. We figure this out together. For them. Maya stared at his hand for a long moment. Then she took it, grip firm despite the tremor. For them. The handshake lasted a beat too long, something unspoken passing between them that neither was ready to examine. Teach me to make those. Ethan nodded at the cinnamon rolls. Maya's lips twitched, almost a smile. That's how we start. In the kitchen. Monday morning, Ethan sent an email to his executive team that Jennifer forwarded 3 times, certain she'd misread. He would be working from home Mondays, effective immediately. Unavailable for meetings, calls, or emergencies unless the building was literally on fire. The responses came fast. His CFO Richard Chen called twice, left increasingly concerned voicemails. The board scheduled an emergency review. His assistant asked if everything was all right at home, using the tone reserved for checking on relatives after funerals. Figure it out, that was all Ethan said before putting his phone on silent. The boys descended the stairs to find their father in jeans and a sweater, sitting at the breakfast table instead of rushing out the door with a protein bar and a travel mug. Carson stopped mid-step, suspicion written across his face. Are you checking on Miss Maya? Tyler's voice carried accusation wrapped in worry. Did she do something wrong? Noah just stared, processing this disruption to establish patterns. I'm spending the day with you. That's all. They exchanged glances, trying to decode this new variable. Maya appeared from the kitchen carrying pancakes, her expression carefully neutral. Whatever arrangement she and Ethan had reached, she wasn't telegraphing it. Your dad's going to help with breakfast today. Ethan's first pancake stuck to the griddle, tore when he tried to flip it, and landed half on the plate, half on the counter. The second burned black while he was scraping up the first. By the third attempt, Tyler was giggling into his hands, and Carson had given up pretending to eat. It's good, Dad. Tyler's lie was kind but unconvincing. Miss Maya, can you make backup pancakes? Carson's question was polite, practical, devastating. Your dad is learning. Maya's voice held no judgment, but Ethan felt it anyway. That's what matters. The homework session went worse. Carson's math worksheet on subtraction with borrowing might as well have been written in ancient Greek. Ethan explained it like a business presentation. Clear, logical, complete. Carson's face scrunched tighter with each word, comprehension sliding further away until tears threatened. I'm stupid. The boy's voice cracked on the word. Ethan froze. His instinct was to correct, to provide facts about intelligence and learning styles and effort, but Carson's face was crumpling, and words felt like the wrong tool entirely. Maya materialized with a bag of chocolate chips. She dumped them on the table between father and son, then disappeared again without explanation. Ethan looked at the candy, at Carson's confusion, at the worksheet. Then understanding clicked. He arranged 10 chocolate chips in a line. You have 10. If I take away 7, how many are left? Carson counted carefully. 3. Right. Now what if you only have 5, but you need to take away 7? You have to borrow from the next column. He demonstrated with the chips, moving them between imaginary columns until the abstract concept became concrete and edible. Carson's face cleared. The next problem, he solved alone. The one after that took half the time. By the end, he was grinning, chocolate smudged on his fingers. You did good. Maya's voice came from the doorway directed at Ethan, not Carson. That was hard for you. How could you tell? You kept clenching your jaw. And you explained the same problem 3 different ways before finding one that clicked. She smiled, small and genuine. That's good teaching, actually. Being willing to try different approaches until something works. Ethan realized his face ached from tension he hadn't noticed carrying. I wanted to just tell him the answer. It would have been faster. Faster isn't always better. Not with kids. Tyler's soccer practice that Tuesday taught Ethan why parents brought folding chairs and thermoses of coffee. The drills ran long. The coach was enthusiastic but disorganized. Tyler spent more time chasing butterflies than soccer balls. Other parents chatted about carpools and classroom politics and upcoming bake sales, the casual intimacy of people who saw each other twice a week and actually knew each other's names. First time here? A man in a worn Stanford hoodie extended his hand. Mike Warren. My daughter's the one attempting a cartwheel instead of defense drills. Ethan Cole. My son's the one currently investigating that anthill. Mike laughed. They'll get it eventually. You just transferred in? Haven't seen you before. The truth sat heavy. I've been busy. Work. Mike nodded without judgment. Yeah, I used to miss everything. Then my company downsized and suddenly I had all the time in the world. Turned out my kid barely knew me. He took a long drink from his thermos. Best thing that ever happened to us. Getting fired. Terrible at the time. Humiliating. But now I know which princess is Riley's favorite and that she puts ranch dressing on everything, including oatmeal. Tyler scored an accidental goal mostly because the ball bounced off his shin while he was waving at Ethan. The boy's face lit up like he'd won the World Cup. He sprinted to the sideline. Dad, did you see? Ethan's chest constricted with something that felt like regret and hope braided together. I saw. That was great. It was an accident. Tyler was honest to a fault. But I'm still counting it. Counts in my book. The boy ran back to the field, energy barely contained in a small frame. Mike Warren watched with the knowing expression of someone who'd traveled this road already. Stick with it. They grow up fast. Miss enough and you blink and they're gone. December brought rain that hammered the windows and turned the backyard into a marsh. Noah drew inside while water streaked the glass, his pictures growing darker, more abstract. Ethan sat beside him one afternoon, not speaking, just present in the silence his youngest son wrapped around himself like armor. 20 minutes passed. Then Noah held up a drawing, black and gray swirls with one spot of red in the center. What is it? Noah considered the question seriously. Feelings. Ethan studied the image, the chaos surrounding that single point of color. Looks like sadness with a little bit of happy trying to get out. The boy blinked, surprised at being understood. He set down that drawing and started another, this time with blue breaking through the gray. Dad? Noah's voice barely registered above the rain. Yeah, buddy. Why did Mom die? The question Ethan had avoided for 4 years, delivered in a 4-year-old's guileless tone. Other parents probably had good answers prepared, therapeutic frameworks, and age-appropriate explanations. Ethan just had truth. Because she loved you so much she was willing to die so you could live. The doctors said they could only save one of you. She chose you. Noah's crayon paused mid-stroke. That's sad. Yes, but it's also the most beautiful thing I know. The boy resumed coloring, processing this information the way he processed everything, quietly and internally. After another few minutes, I wish I could have met her. Me too, Ethan's throat tightened. She would have loved you. All of you. Miss Maya loves us. The observation wasn't a question, didn't demand response, just a fact presented for consideration. Ethan found himself nodding. She does. Do you love her? Children's questions were guided missiles, detonating where you least expected. Ethan watched rain trace patterns on the window, searching for an answer that was both honest and appropriate for a 4-year-old's understanding. I'm learning to. The admission surprised him. Noah returned to his drawing satisfied. Adults made everything complicated. Children just stated what was obvious and moved on. Christmas Eve arrived with unusual warmth, California winter refusing to cooperate with seasonal expectations. Maya insisted on a real tree, so Ethan found himself at a tree lot in Palo Alto, surrounded by families and couples and the overwhelming scent of pine. Carson wanted the tallest one. Tyler wanted the fullest. Noah wanted one with a bird's nest in it, which the lot didn't have, but got points for creativity. They compromised on a 7-foot Douglas fir that tilted slightly, but had good needle retention, according to the teenager working the lot who clearly wanted them to just pick something so he could close early. Decorating turned into chaos. The boys had opinions on ornament placement that contradicted each other and physics. Maya made hot chocolate from scratch, the real kind, with actual chocolate melted in milk, not powder from a packet. Christmas music played from speakers, the kind of cheerful acoustic covers that should have been annoying, but somehow weren't. Ethan hung Carson's school photo ornament, the boy's gap-toothed smile frozen in silver frame. Tyler's hand-painted pine cone went next, lopsided and covered in too much glitter. Noah's paper snowflake, cut with careful precision, found a place where light would shine through it. Then Ethan retrieved a box from his office safe, one he hadn't opened in 4 years. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, Sarah's locket rested against velvet. Silver, delicate, a photo of 2-year-old Carson tucked inside before Noah was even conceived. His hands shook, opening the clasp. "What's that?" Carson's curiosity overcame caution. "Your mother's." Ethan's voice came out rougher than intended. "She wore it every day. I thought, it belongs on the tree, where you can see it." He hung it carefully, the weight of it disproportionate to its size. The boys gathered around, staring at this artifact from a woman they barely remembered or never knew. "Is that my mom?" Carson touched it gently, like it might break. "Yes, she loved you very much." Maya stood in the doorway, witnessing this without intruding. Her eyes were bright, understanding the significance without needing explanation. She mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Christmas morning, Carson woke the house at 5:30, thundering down the stairs, with Tyler close behind and Noah trailing at a more cautious pace. Ethan was already awake, had been since 4, sitting in the living room watching the tree lights and wondering when his life had become something he wanted to be present for. The boys stopped at the guest house door, uncertain. Maya lived there, technically separate, technically not family, despite spending every waking hour with them. "Go get her." Ethan's voice carried no hesitation. "She's part of this." Carson sprinted. Tyler followed. Noah walked with determination. They returned with Maya in tow, her hair uncombed and eyes still heavy with sleep, wearing the kind of soft expression that came from being woken by children who wanted you there. The presents were excessive, probably. Ethan had ordered them through Jennifer, who'd suggested books and educational toys and age-appropriate enrichment. He'd approved without looking. But mixed in were things the boys actually wanted. Tyler's new soccer cleats, Noah's art supplies, Carson's dinosaur encyclopedia he'd been talking about for weeks. Maya received handmade cards from all 3. Carson's read "To My Favorite Person" in careful printing. Tyler's featured a crayon drawing of her making pancakes. Noah's was just a picture of her hugging all 3 of them. No words necessary. She cried. Not delicate tears, but the kind that shook shoulders and required the boys to pile on for a group hug that nearly toppled her. Ethan's gift to her was small, wrapped simply. She opened it slowly, like she was afraid of what she'd find. Inside, an antique wooden recipe book holder, hand-carved with vines and flowers, clearly expensive and clearly chosen with thought, rather than delegated to an assistant. "For your grandmother's book. So it's safe." Maya stared at him, something shifting in her expression. "You noticed?" "I notice everything about you." The words came out before he could reconsider them, landing in the space between them like a declaration neither was ready to acknowledge. Her gift to him was heavier, wrapped in brown paper. Inside, a photo album, the kind people made by hand before everything went digital. Pictures of the boys over the past 3 months. Carson helping with breakfast, flour on his nose. Tyler scoring a goal, mid-celebration. Noah presenting a finished drawing, solemn pride on his face. The last page held a photo Ethan didn't remember being taken. Himself with Carson on his shoulders. Tyler and Noah hanging off his arms, all 4 of them laughing at something outside the frame. Maya must have captured it one afternoon when he wasn't performing fatherhood, just living it. "Your family." Her voice was quiet. "Don't forget them again." Ethan couldn't speak around the obstruction in his throat, just nodded and set the album down carefully, like it might shatter. The new year arrived without fanfare. January meant board meetings and quarterly reviews and the annual performance evaluation that Ethan had been dreading. His CFO, Richard Chen, opened with numbers. Revenue up 3%, development pipeline strong, market share holding steady. All good news. Then Richard pivoted. Your hours are down 45% since October. Key deals have stalled because you weren't available for critical negotiations. The Singapore merger collapsed and you didn't pursue alternatives. Other executives shifted uncomfortably. Ethan had built this company through force of will and relentless focus. Seeing him pull back felt like watching a foundation crack. I'm restructuring my priorities. Ethan kept his voice level. Your priority is this company. Richard's frustration finally broke through. You built it. You are the reason we're successful. You can't just check out. I'm not checking out. I'm creating balance. Balance? Richard leaned forward, dropping any pretense of politeness. This company requires 100%. Your contract says that. Your equity stake demands it. You don't get to play part-time CEO because you suddenly decided to be super dad. The accusation hung in the air. Ethan looked around the table at faces that ranged from concerned to openly hostile. These people had made millions because of his focus, his dedication, his willingness to sacrifice everything for success. Now he was asking them to accept less, and they weren't adapting well. My children need me. The simple statement sounded weak even to his own ears. Hire better help. Richard's solution was immediate, practical, missing the point entirely. You're a billionaire. Pay someone to handle the domestic stuff. I tried that for 6 years, didn't work. Then try harder. Richard stood, signaling the meeting's end. We have an emergency board vote scheduled for next month. Get your priorities straight before then, or we'll make the decision for you. The implicit threat was clear. They could remove him. Unlikely, given his majority stake, but they could make his life miserable enough that stepping down seemed preferable to fighting. Ethan drove home in rush hour traffic, knuckles white on the steering wheel. He'd built the company to prove something, that he could succeed without emotional entanglement, that control was more valuable than connection. Now the empire demanded its due, and he had sons who needed him to choose differently. Maya was in the kitchen when he arrived, preparing dinner while the boys did homework at the table. The domestic scene should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like evidence of his failing on both fronts. Inadequate CEO, inadequate father, trying to serve two masters and satisfying neither. She looked up as he entered, read his face immediately. Bad day? They want me to choose. Company or family, as if it's that simple. Maybe it is. The boys sensed tension, went quiet in that way children do when adult problems seep into their awareness. Carson's pencil stilled mid-problem. Tyler stopped swinging his legs. Noah watched with those solemn eyes that saw too much. Ethan forced a smile. How was school? The question redirected them, launching Tyler into a detailed account of kickball politics and Carson into complaints about long division. Noah just drew, but his shoulders relaxed, crisis averted. Later, after the boys were asleep, Ethan found Maya on the back porch despite the cold. She had coffee and a blanket and the look of someone who'd been expecting him. They want me to choose. His voice came out flat. Richard basically said, hire better help and stop playing dad. What do you want? The question should have been simple. Ethan had spent his entire adult life knowing what he wanted. More market share, better products, bigger exits. But this was different. I want my sons to know me. But I also built that company from nothing. 10 years of my life. Maya sipped her coffee, considering. Buildings crumble, companies fail, children remember. The words settled between them like a judgment he couldn't argue against. 3 months into their arrangement, the routine had found its rhythm. Ethan home by 6 every evening, dinner together, homework help that was getting less disastrous. Bedtime stories where he finally learned to do voices that made Carson laugh and Tyler request encore performances. But something else was building. Pressure that had nothing to do with fatherhood and everything to do with the woman who'd made it possible. He watched her more than necessary, the way she moved through the kitchen with practiced grace, how she listened to the boys with complete attention, like their stories about recess drama and playground injustices mattered as much as any board meeting. The way she laughed, unguarded and genuine, at Tyler's terrible jokes. She was young and beautiful, yes, but that wasn't what carved him hollow. It was the kindness she treated as default setting, the patience that never seemed forced, the way she found joy in small things that should have been mundane. A perfect cinnamon roll, The first flowers pushing through winter soil, Noah's latest drawing. One Friday in late January, they were baking together while the boys were at a friend's house. Maya had insisted Ethan needed to master at least one recipe from scratch, and somehow that translated to chocolate chip cookies at 9 p.m. while rain hammered the windows. Her hand guided his, showing the right pressure for incorporating butter. The touch was professional, instructional, except for how it wasn't. How awareness sparked along his skin like static. How she pulled away quickly, color rising in her cheeks. "You're getting good at this." Her voice was carefully neutral. "The fatherhood thing. I have a good teacher." They both know he wasn't talking about cookie technique. The timer dinged. Maya moved to check the oven, giving herself distance. When she returned, her expression had shuddered into something more guarded. 6 months is almost half over. "Yeah, have you thought about what happens then?" "Every day." The admission came easier than it should. And Ethan stopped pretending to measure flour. "I don't want you to leave, not just for the boys, for me." Maya's breath caught. "You can't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I'm the woman who lied to you, deceived you, violated a contract and broke the law to get close to a child I had no right to see. You're also the woman who saved my family, who taught me how to love my children, who showed up every single day when I didn't." His voice dropped. "I'm falling in love with you. Maybe have been for weeks. Maybe since that first night in my office when you told me the truth and I saw someone brave enough to fight for what mattered." Maya set down the mixing bowl, hands trembling. "You can't be." "Why not?" "Because I gave away your son for money. Because when this falls apart, and it will, the boys lose both of us. Because everything in my life falls apart eventually, and I can't survive watching you realize I'm not worth the risk." "What if you are?" The question hung unanswered. Maya stepped back, maintaining distance like it was armor. "Not yet. Not until the 6 months are up. I need to know this is real, not just gratitude or convenience." "Maya, please." Her voice broke. "Don't make this harder than it already is." The phone call came February 1st, right after lunch. Ethan was in a video conference when his personal line lit up with a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. "Mr. Cole." The voice was crisp, professional, carried the authority of expensive legal representation. "This is Attorney Morrison from Elite Reproductive Services Legal Department. We need to discuss Maya Chen." Ethan's blood went cold. He muted the video conference, turned away from the camera. "What about her?" "We've received information that Ms. Chen is currently in your employ, despite contractual obligations prohibiting any future contact. We have photographic evidence placing her at your residence, interacting with your children, specifically the child she carried 6 years ago. The investigator, or someone else." "Did it matter?" Morrison continued, relentless. "This constitutes major breach of contract. We take confidentiality agreements seriously, Mr. Cole. Our business model depends on surrogates understanding that surrendered parental rights are permanent. What do you want?" "Mrs. Chen must be terminated immediately. You will sign an affidavit confirming no ongoing relationship. We're seeking $500,000 in damages from her for breach. And if you knowingly employed her despite her identity, we'll pursue action against you as well." The threat landed like a physical blow. "You have 48 hours to comply. After that, we file with family court and report to social services for investigation into household stability and appropriateness of care." The call ended. Ethan sat frozen while his video conference continued without him. Colleagues speaking in muted voices about quarterly projections and market analysis, everything that used to matter and suddenly didn't. He drove home in daylight, abandoning the office without explanation. Jennifer called twice. He ignored her. Richard sent texts questioning his priorities. He ignored those too. Maya was in the kitchen, baking with the frantic energy of someone using work to quiet anxiety. The counter was covered. Cinnamon rolls, cookies, bread, pastries in various stages of completion. She looked up when he entered, and her face confirmed she somehow already knew. Elite Reproductive Services called. His voice was hollow. "They know you're here. 48 hours to fire you or they file suit. 500,000 in damages. Social services investigation." Maya set down her rolling pin with careful precision. "This is my fault. We'll fight it." No, she was already moving, pulling off her apron. I'll leave tonight. Go back to Portland. You'll tell them I deceived you completely, that you had no idea. I'm not letting you take the fall alone. You don't have a choice. Maya's voice was fierce. They can destroy you. Take the boys. I won't let that happen because of my mistake. You're not a mistake. The words came out raw. You're the best thing that's happened to this family. Then let me protect it. Let me go. Footsteps on the stairs. Carson appeared first, school backpack still on, followed by Tyler and Noah. They must have heard voices, sensed the wrongness. Miss Maya? Carson's voice was small. Why are you crying? All three boys converged on her, protective instincts overriding everything else. Tyler's arms wrapped around her waist. Noah grabbed her hand. Carson positioned himself between her and Ethan like a tiny sentinel. Dad, what did you do? The accusation from his own son hurt worse than the legal threats, worse than board pressure, worse than anything except the reality that he was about to lose the person who'd made them whole. Miss Maya needs to go away for a while. Ethan forced the words out. To handle some grown-up business. No, Carson's voice rose. You're making her leave, like you made Mom go away. The logic was child logic, wrong in facts but devastating in emotional truth. In Carson's 6-year-old understanding, mothers disappeared when fathers failed to protect them. Your dad didn't make me leave, Carson. Maya's voice was steady despite the tears. And I'm coming back. I promise. The lie was kind but hollow. They all heard it. Maya packed quickly, throwing essentials into a duffel while the boys watched from her doorway, stunned into silence. She kissed each of them, long and careful, like memorizing the feel of their hair under her hands, their small bodies pressed against hers. I love you, all of you. I'll be back as soon as I can. Tyler clung to her. We need you. Noah just stared, already retreating into the silence he used as shelter when the world proved too much. Carson turned to Ethan, tears streaming. I hate you. If she goes away forever, I hate you. The words landed like bullets, each one finding its target. Maya's car was packed by 9 p.m. Snow had started falling, unusual for California in February, like the universe decided this moment needed pathetic fallacy. She stood in the driveway, coat pulled tight, looking small and lost. Ethan followed her out, the boys watching from the upstairs window. I love you. He said it clearly, no hedging, no safety net. For the first time, I'm in love with you, and I don't care if it's too soon or complicated, or if we only had 3 months. I'd rather fight this together than let you face it alone. Maya looked at him with something like heartbreak. Then let me go. Let me protect you. If you love me, let me do this one thing right. She kissed him, brief and desperate, tasting like salt and regret. Then she was in her car, taillights disappearing down the driveway, red lights and white snow gone. Ethan stood in the cold until he couldn't see her anymore. The house behind him was too big, too quiet. Inside, 3 boys were learning that love didn't protect you from loss. That sometimes the people you needed most left anyway. That being good wasn't enough to make them stay. Carson cried himself to sleep that night, face pressed into a pillow that smelled like Maya's lavender shampoo. Tyler raged, throwing things and screaming until he collapsed from exhaustion. Noah went silent, completely silent, not speaking even when Ethan begged him to say something, anything. February stretched ahead like exile. 3 months until any possible resolution. 3 months of living with the consequences of loving someone the world said he had no right to keep. The house smelled wrong without her. Store-bought bread instead of fresh baked. No cinnamon in the morning. No laughter in the kitchen. Just silence and absence and the terrible arithmetic of loss. February stretched into April without mercy. 2 months that felt like years. Each day a lesson in survival rather than living. Ethan learned that parenting alone was brutal in ways boardrooms never prepared you for. No Maya to catch the mistakes before they became disasters. No safety net when Tyler melted down over mismatched socks or Carson's anxiety spiraled into hyperventilation at bedtime. No one to coax words from Noah, who'd stopped speaking entirely, communicating only through drawings that grew darker each day. Breakfast became battlefield strategy. Ethan burned oatmeal 3 mornings in a row before accepting that some things required actual attention instead of multitasking. He started setting alarms, measuring portions, following recipes like they were legal contracts that couldn't be breached without consequences. Carson's nightmares returned with vengeance. The boy would wake screaming about mothers who disappeared into snow, about being abandoned in grocery stores, about falling through ice while everyone watched. Ethan held him those nights, his own inadequacy sharp as broken glass. He didn't have Maya's instinct for the right words, her ability to transform terror into comfort with nothing but presence and patience. But he showed up, night after night, even when morning meetings loomed and exhaustion made his bones ache. He showed up because that's what she taught him mattered. Tyler's reading regressed. The specialized techniques Maya had used, the patient repetition, the celebration of small victories, Ethan tried to replicate them from memory, fumbling through like someone following choreography they'd only seen once. The boy's frustration mounted when letters still jumped and swapped places. When his father couldn't make the magic work the way she had, we'll figure it out together. Ethan heard himself echo her words, inadequate copies of the real thing. We just need more practice. Tyler threw the book across the room. It's not the same. You're trying, but you're not her. The truth of it stung worse because the boy wasn't being cruel, just honest. Noah's silence was worst of all. 6 weeks without a single word, the youngest building walls that no amount of coaxing could breach. He drew compulsively, pictures of 4 figures that became 3, houses with empty windows, trees stripped bare. When Ethan tried to engage, Noah would simply hand him another drawing and return to his work, locked in a world where words were insufficient for expressing loss. The school counselor called. All 3 boys are showing signs of significant emotional distress. Carson's having panic attacks during class. Tyler got in a fight, completely out of character. Noah hasn't spoken to anyone in weeks. What's going on at home? Family emergency. Ethan's explanation was vague, deliberately so. We're working through it. These children need stability, Mr. Cole. Whatever's happening, they need consistency and support, professional help if necessary. He hired a child therapist. Dr. Rebecca Martinez came highly recommended, specialized in childhood trauma and attachment. She met with each boy separately, then requested a session with Ethan. They're grieving. Her assessment was clinical, compassionate. Someone important disappeared from their lives suddenly. That registers as abandonment, regardless of adult reasons. She'll come back. Ethan said it like conviction could make it true. Do you believe that? I have to. Dr. Martinez leaned forward, professional distance softening. What they need isn't certainty about the future, it's security in the present. They need to know you're not going anywhere. That even if everyone else leaves, you'll stay. The words carved through his defenses. For 4 years after Sarah's death, he'd been emotionally absent while physically present. Now he was physically present, but the boys still felt abandoned because they'd lost the person who had actually shown up for them. I'm trying. The admission felt like failure. Trying is enough. Keep showing up. Eventually they'll trust it. The lawyer Jennifer Park had recommended was formidable in the way California litigators were. Designer suit, perfect highlights, a smile that promised she'd eviscerate opposing counsel while maintaining impeccable professionalism. She listened to Ethan's explanation without interrupting, taking notes in shorthand that looked like its own language. The contract is enforceable. Her assessment was blunt. Ms. Chen signed away all rights, agreed to no contact, received substantial compensation. Elite Reproductive Services has precedent on their side. But there are angles. The contract was signed under duress, dying brother, medical emergency, financial desperation. 22 years old with no legal representation reviewing the terms. We can argue it was unconscionable, exploitative of someone vulnerable. She flipped through documents. More importantly, we argue best interest of the children. They're thriving with her, declining without her. We document that improvement, then the regression. Make the case that removing her permanently damages them. What about the social services investigation? That's our biggest problem. If they determine the household is unstable or that Miss Chen poses a risk, they can recommend removal of the children from your custody pending review. Jennifer met his eyes. We need to show you're fit. She's beneficial. And together you provide better care than either could separately. We need witnesses, Documentation. Evidence that this unconventional arrangement serves the children better than conventional alternatives. Ethan started making calls. The pediatrician who'd been seeing the boys since birth agreed to review records, provide testimony about their health trajectory. Principal Rodriguez from the private academy where Carson and Tyler attended pulled files showing academic and behavioral changes correlating with Maya's arrival and subsequent departure. The soccer coach remembered Ethan from that first practice. Heard you're going through something. Tyler's a good kid. Whatever you need, I'll testify. Dr. Martinez compiled psychological evaluations. All three children demonstrate secure attachment to both Mr. Cole and Ms. Chen. Separation has caused measurable trauma. Reunion would likely restore stability. The most unexpected call came from Mrs. Helen Foster. The former housekeeper who'd brought Maya into their lives reached out after 3 weeks of radio silence. I need to talk to you about Maya Chen. Her voice carried no preamble. I knew who she was when I hired her. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. You knew? She came to me 3 years ago, found me through my sister who works in Portland Social Services. She discovered your name somehow, wanted information about you and the boys. I told her that was inappropriate, that I couldn't violate your privacy. Helen paused, choosing words carefully. But I also saw a mother desperate to know if her sacrifice meant something. So I made a different offer. If a position opened in your household, I'd recommend her. No promises, no guarantees, just a chance. Why would you do that? Because those boys needed a mother, and you needed someone who understood that parenting isn't a job, it's a calling. Maya had that. I could see it in how she talked about Carson, the son she'd never met but couldn't stop wondering about. Helen's voice firmed. I'll testify to all of it. My actions, my reasoning, my observation of the results. Whatever helps, you could be liable for conspiracy, facilitating contract violation. Then I'm liable. Some things matter more than legal liability. Portland looked exactly as Maya remembered. Gray skies that leaked rain more often than not, food carts on every corner, the scent of coffee and hops, impossibility that had always felt like coming home. Except now, everything was tinged with absence. Her old studio apartment had been rented to someone else. Her friend's couch was temporary refuge, not salvation. The bakery on Hawthorne hired her without question. Morning shift, minimum wage, hands in dough before sunrise. The work was meditative, requiring attention that left no room for the thoughts that spiraled when she was idle. Knead, shape, proof, bake. Repeat until your hands ached and your mind went quiet. But nights were brutal. 8 weeks in Portland felt like exile. She'd pull out her phone, scroll through the few photos she'd taken of the boys when they weren't looking. Carson helping with breakfast, flour dusting his nose. Tyler mid-laugh, face split with joy. Noah presenting a drawing, solemn pride in his posture. She'd drafted 1,000 texts to Ethan and deleted them all. The lawyer had been explicit. No contact. Nothing that could be construed as attempting to maintain a relationship with the children in violation of court orders. The therapist her friend recommended specialized in birth trauma and relinquishment. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo had kind eyes and a directness that cut through deflection. You gave away your son. The statement wasn't accusation, just fact. How do you live with that? I don't. Maya's response was automatic, honest. I just survive it. Surviving isn't living. The sessions were excavation, pulling up buried grief and examining it in unforgiving light. The shame of choosing money over motherhood, never mind that the money bought 6 more years with her brother. The guilt of falling in love with all 3 boys when only one carried her DNA. The terror that she'd destroyed their lives by inserting herself where she didn't belong. You keep saying you don't belong. Dr. Okonkwo's pen tapped against her notepad. But from everything you've described, those children chose you as much as you chose them. That's not infiltration. That's family. I signed a contract. You signed a document under extreme duress that asked you to treat your biological child like a product transaction. That's not a contract. That's coercion dressed in legal language. The sessions cracked something open that Maya had kept sealed for 6 years. She cried in ways she hadn't allowed herself before. Not quiet, polite tears, but the kind that shook ribs and scraped throat raw. Grieved the 30 seconds she'd held Carson before they took him. Grieved the 6 years of wondering. Grieved the 3 months she'd had with all 3 boys before it was ripped away again. But something else emerged through the grief. Clarity. I didn't come back for custody. Maya's voice strengthened as she spoke. I came to know if my sacrifice meant something. If Carson was happy. If the life I gave him was worth the price. And he was happy. They all were until I left. So the question isn't whether you belong. It's whether you're brave enough to fight for the family you've already built. April arrived wet and tentative, spring struggling to break through winter's grip. The court date was set for the 15th, family court in San Francisco County, Judge Patricia Wong presiding. Ethan had researched her, former family law attorney, reputation for fairness, mother of two, no obvious biases that would predict her ruling. Jennifer prepared him like a witness in a corporate trial. Stick to facts, show remorse for not discovering Ms. Chen's identity sooner, but emphasize the positive outcomes. Don't attack the agency. We need to look reasonable, not vindictive. The courthouse steps felt like walking toward judgment. Ethan wore his most conservative suit, the one that said responsible CEO, not reckless billionaire. Jennifer walked beside him, heels clicking with confidence he didn't feel. Inside, Maya waited with her own attorney, a public defender named Carlos Ruiz, who'd taken her case pro bono after hearing the details. She looked thinner, paler, like 2 months had aged her years. But when her eyes met Ethan's across the corridor, something sparked that distance and lawyers and impending litigation couldn't extinguish. The boys sat in a waiting room with Mrs. Foster, unaware their futures were being decided down the hall. Ethan had explained it as grown-up business that would determine when Miss Maya could come home. Carson had made him promise not to mess it up. Tyler had hugged him with desperate strength. Noah had handed him a drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands while storm clouds gathered overhead. All rise. The bailiff's voice cut through nervous whispers. The Honorable Judge Patricia Wong, presiding. Judge Wong was younger than Ethan expected. Early 50s with silver threading through black hair pulled into a neat bun. She reviewed the case file with the concentration of someone who understood that children's lives hung in the balance. This is unusual. Her first words set the tone. A surrogacy contract violation, where the intended parent wants the surrogate to maintain contact. Elite Reproductive Services seeking damages and permanent separation. Everyone claims to be acting in the children's best interest. She looked up, gaze sharp. Let's see if that's actually true. Attorney Morrison represented Elite Reproductive Services. Late 50s, silver-haired, carrying himself with the certainty of someone who'd never lost a case. He opened with precedent, citing 3 cases where surrogates who violated no-contact clauses were found liable, contracts enforced, damages awarded. Our business model depends on clear boundaries. If surrogates believe they can reclaim access to children they've relinquished, the entire system becomes untenable. Intended parents need certainty. Surrogates need clear expectations. He pulled out photos. This is Ms. Chen at Mr. Cole's residence, interacting with the children, specifically the child she carried and surrendered. She used a false identity to gain employment. She deceived everyone involved. These are not the actions of someone who made a mistake. This is calculated, premeditated violation. Jennifer countered with precision. Ms. Chen was 22 years old when she signed that contract. Her brother was dying of brain cancer. She had no legal representation reviewing terms. Elite Reproductive Services offered $80,000, roughly $8.88 per hour, when you calculate 9 months of pregnancy as full-time work. That's exploitation, not fair dealing. She presented Dr. Martinez's evaluation. These children are thriving with Ms. Chen present, declining without her. Carson's panic attacks have returned. Tyler's academic progress has reversed. Noah stopped speaking entirely for 6 weeks. This isn't about contract law. It's about 3 boys who found stability and lost it because adults prioritize paperwork over well-being. Judge Wong listened without expression, taking notes in small, neat handwriting. Ms. Chen, you'll testify first. Maya approached the witness stand like someone walking to execution. She was sworn in, voice steady despite visible trembling. Morrison went first, questions designed to establish violation and intent. Did you sign a contract with Elite Reproductive Services agreeing to no future contact with the child you carried? Yes. Did you understand that term? Yes. Did you create a false identity specifically to gain access to Mr. Cole's household? Maya hesitated, then, yes. Morrison smiled, victory already tasted. So you admit to fraud, contract violation, and deliberate deception of your employer? I admit to being desperate to see if my son was happy. Maya's voice strengthened. I admit to 6 years of wondering if the choice I made, giving him away to save my brother's life, was worth the quantity. I admit to taking the only path I could find to answer that question. The courtroom went quiet. Your Honor, this is emotional testimony, not, Morrison tried to interrupt. I'll allow it. Judge Wong's tone shut him down. Continued, Chen. I carried Carson for 9 months, felt him move inside me, held him for 30 seconds after he was born before nurses took him because the contract said no bonding, no attachment, just transaction and payment. I signed papers that said he wasn't mine, would never be mine, that I'd given up every right to even know his name. Maya's tears fell unchecked. And then I went home and used that money to buy 6 more years with my brother. 6 years of treatments and hospital stays and small moments of joy between the pain. He died 3 months ago, and in his final weeks, he asked if it was worth it. If the baby I gave away had a good life, I couldn't answer him. I didn't know. So I found out. Jennifer took over. Ms. Chen, did you intend to take Carson from Mr. Cole? Never, the answer was immediate. He has a father who's learning to love him. I wouldn't destroy that. Then what did you want? Just to see him smile. Once. To know the sacrifice meant something. The sincerity in her voice was undeniable, dangerous to Morrison's narrative of calculating deception. Ethan's testimony came next. Morrison attacked immediately, suggesting he'd knowingly employed a contract violator, that his judgment was compromised by romantic involvement, that his recent focus on family indicated instability rather than growth. Your company's performance has declined since Ms. Chen entered your household. Your board is concerned about your capacity to lead. You've gone from working 80-hour weeks to 40. That suggests someone whose priorities are fundamentally compromised. It suggests someone who realized building an empire means nothing if you lose your family in the process. Ethan's response came without hesitation. I spent 4 years being an absent father because my wife died giving birth to my youngest son. I convinced myself that providing material advantages was sufficient, that professional care could replace parental presence. Ms. Chen showed me how wrong I was. Judge Wong leaned forward slightly, attention sharpened. She taught me that being a father isn't signing checks or hiring staff. It's showing up for homework help even when you're terrible at math. It's sitting through soccer practice in the cold. It's holding your child through nightmares. It's being present even when presence is inconvenient. Ethan met Morrison's glare without flinching. My company's performance is fine. I've learned that leadership doesn't require martyrdom. What's declined is my willingness to sacrifice everything for profit. If that makes me unfit, then I'm unfit. But my children are better for it. Jennifer brought up the community witnesses one by one. Kim, the pediatrician, testified about measurable health improvements during Maya's tenure and subsequent regression. Principal Rodriguez presented academic records showing the same pattern. The soccer coach spoke about Tyler's confidence growth and recent backsliding. Mrs. Foster's testimony was the bombshell Morrison hadn't anticipated. She admitted her role, accepted responsibility, then delivered the killing blow. I worked for Mr. Cole for 10 years, watched him build an empire while his sons grew up barely knowing him. After his wife died, he shut down emotionally. The boys were cared for but not loved, not in the way children need. She looked directly at the judge. When Maya came to me asking about Mr. Cole, I saw an opportunity, not to help her violate a contract, but to help 3 motherless boys find someone who would show up for them. And it worked. Those children blossomed under her care. If that's conspiracy, then I'm guilty. But I do it again, because some things matter more than legal technicalities. Morrison tried to recover. The pattern of deception. Judge Wong cut him off. I've heard enough from the adults. Bring in the children. The suggestion sparked immediate objections from both attorneys, but Wong was unmoved. They're old enough to be affected by this decision. I want to hear from them. Carson came first, small in the witness chair but determined. Judge Wong's voice softened. Carson, do you know why we're here today? People want to make Miss Maya go away forever. How would that make you feel? The boy's composure cracked. Like dying. She's the only mom I have. What about your birth mother? She died when Noah was born. Miss Maya is our mom now. Simple, final, devastating. Tyler's testimony was defiant protection. Miss Maya taught me to read when nobody else could. She makes words stop jumping. If she leaves, I'll forget how. He crossed his arms, glaring at Morrison. And it's not fair. We didn't do anything wrong. Noah was last, the youngest who hadn't spoken in weeks. He sat in the chair, too small for it, and Judge Wong approached carefully. Noah, can you tell me about Miss Maya? The courtroom held its breath. 30 seconds passed, a minute. Noah's eyes found Maya in the gallery, and something shifted in his expression. She knows when I need quiet. His voice was barely audible. And when I need hugs. And she never leaves. Except she did. And it hurts. The first words he'd spoken in 6 weeks offered not to his father or his therapist, but to a judge who held their future in her hands. Judge Wong recessed for 2 hours. The wait was agony. Ethan sat in the corridor with Maya separated by their lawyers in a distance that felt like miles. He wanted to tell her it would be okay, that they'd win, that they'd figure it out. But he had no guarantees and she deserved more than empty promises. The boys sat with Mrs. Foster, playing a card game none of them paid attention to. Carson kept glancing at the courtroom doors. Tyler fidgeted with destructive energy. Noah drew, always drew, finding solace in images when words failed. All rise. Judge Wong's expression was unreadable as she took her seat. She reviewed notes for a long moment before speaking. This is the most unusual case I've encountered in 15 years on the bench. Clear contract violation. Equally clear benefit to the children. Adults who behave badly, but from understandable motives. She looked at Morrison. Elite Reproductive Services has legitimate concerns about precedent. If every surrogate who regrets relinquishment can simply create a false identity and insert themselves into their biological child's life, the system becomes unworkable. Then her gaze shifted to Maya and Ethan. However, contracts signed under extreme duress can be challenged. A 22-year-old with a dying brother and no legal counsel is not making free choices. She's surviving. The contract was unconscionable. Morrison opened his mouth to object. Wong's raised hand stopped him. More importantly, the best interest of the children is paramount. These boys are demonstrably better with Miss Chen present. Medical records, academic reports, psychological evaluation, everything supports that conclusion. She paused, weight of judgment visible. Here's my ruling. Ms. Chen will pay $50,000 in penalties to Elite Reproductive Services. Payment plan over 10 years. Mr. Cole will co-sign as guarantor. In exchange, the contract is modified. Ms. Chen may remain in the household as family consultant, not employee, consultant. Mr. Cole retains sole legal custody. Ms. Chen receives defined visitation rights in writing, annual family court reviews. If the children continue thriving, the arrangement continues. If problems arise, it ends. She looked at each of them in turn. This is compromise, not perfect. But sometimes perfect is the enemy of good enough. Don't make me regret this. The gavel fell. Morrison looked furious. Maya was crying. Ethan couldn't breathe around the relief choking his throat. One more thing. Judge Wong gestured them closer, voice dropping below official record. Off the record, I was a surrogate 20 years ago. Gave my daughter to a couple who couldn't conceive. I think about her every day. Wonder if she's happy, if I made the right choice, if she ever thinks about me. She met Maya's eyes. You two have what I never got, a chance to know. Don't waste it. That evening, Maya came home. The boys heard her car in the driveway before Ethan could announce anything. They erupted from the house like champagne corks, all three hitting her simultaneously in a collision of limbs and tears and words tumbling over each other, too fast to separate. You're back. You came back. You promised and you came back. She sank to her knees on the driveway, gathering them close, and Ethan watched his family knit itself back together piece by piece. The hole that had gaped for 2 months sealed over. Not perfectly, but enough. Inside, after the boys finally released her and scattered to show her everything she'd missed, drawings and school projects in the gap where Tyler's tooth had fallen out, Maya and Ethan stood in the kitchen that had always been her territory. "There's something we need to tell Carson." Her voice was steady despite visible fear. "About me, about where he came from. Tonight, he's old enough to know some version of the truth, and he deserves to hear it from us, not overhear it or find out some other way." The family meeting happened after dinner. All five gathered in the living room that had transformed from showpiece to actual living space over the past months. Carson sensed the weight of what was coming, his anxiety manifesting in rigid posture and quick breathing. "We need to talk about something important." Ethan's voice was gentle. "About Miss Maya and Carson and where babies come from." Tyler perked up. "Are you getting married?" "We haven't talked about that, but there's something you should know about how Carson was born." Maya took over, her words careful and age-appropriate. 6 years ago, when Carson was just a tiny baby growing, he grew in my tummy instead of in a mommy who lives here. That's called being a surrogate." Carson's face scrunched in confusion. "You're my mom?" "Biologically, yes, but your dad is your dad. He's the one raising you and taking care of you." "Why didn't you keep me?" The question every adopted child asks eventually, the one with no good answer. Maya's eyes filled, but her voice stayed strong. "Because my brother Michael was very sick with cancer. He needed expensive surgery, and I didn't have enough money. So I made a very hard choice. I helped your dad and his wife have you. They paid me money that saved Michael's life for 6 more years. But it meant giving you to a family who would love you and take care of you." Carson processed this with the seriousness of a child trying to understand adult concepts with limited framework. "Did you want to keep me?" "Every single day, more than anything. But I loved my brother too, and I had to choose." Tears tracked down her face now, unchecked. "For 6 years I wondered if you were okay, if you were happy, if the choice was worth it. Then I found out where you were, and I had to know." "So you came here?" Carson was still puzzling it out. "I came here, and I met you and your brothers, and I fell in love with all three of you." She looked at Tyler and Noah. "You didn't grow in my tummy, but I love you just as much. You're all mine now if you want to be. Can I call you Mom?" Carson's question came tentative, testing. "If you want to. But your dad is still your dad. Nothing changes that. Can we have two parents? That's allowed?" Ethan pulled Carson into his lap. "That's allowed. You can have a dad and a mom who both love you very much." Tyler, never one for complex emotional processing, shrugged. "Can I call you Mom too?" "Please." Noah simply moved to Maya's side and leaned against her, the question and answer both unnecessary. "Mom, Maya." The words were quiet but certain. October returned with the slow inevitability of seasons completing their circle. 2 years since Ethan had come home early and seen Maya with his sons under the oak tree. The leaves were falling again, amber and rust, spinning lazy spirals in afternoon light that felt like memory made visible. The journey between that first October and this one had been neither smooth nor simple. The engagement came quietly in June of that first year after the trial. Simple gold band presented not with grand gestures, but with certainty earned through crisis survived together. The wedding followed in November, small gathering under this same oak tree with Judge Wong officiating, Mrs. Foster crying through the entire ceremony, three boys in miniature suits trying not to giggle during vows that promise forever. Emma arrived the following March, 3 weeks early and impatient, pink and screaming and healthy. Maya had held her immediately this time. Not 30 stolen seconds, but hours, days, years, stretching forward with no contracts or countdowns or payment due. The daughter she got to keep, to raise, to watch grow alongside the sons who'd chosen her as much as she'd chosen them. Now Sunday afternoon found them under the oak tree again, the scene echoing that first discovery, but transformed by everything that had changed. Ethan stood teaching the boys baseball with his usual complete incompetence. Some things even 2 years couldn't fix. Carson, 8 now, and losing teeth, actually connected with the ball, sending it sailing with a crack of wood against leather. Tyler, 7 and finally reading chapter books without stumbling, was more interested in the beetle he'd discovered near what was theoretically second base. Noah, 6 and carrying a portfolio of drawings that impressed his kindergarten teacher, sat in the grass capturing the whole scene in crayon and marker. Maya watched from her chair, one hand resting on her belly, where their second daughter was already making her presence known at 4 months along. Sarah, they decided, full name this time, not just middle name borrowed, honoring the wife who'd come first, the mother these boys deserved to remember. Carson's ball landed near her feet. He ran over to retrieve it, then paused, studying her face with the too perceptive gaze of a child who'd learned early that adults carried complicated emotions. "Mom, you okay?" "Perfect, sweetheart. Just thinking about how far we've come. From when you first came here. From when I was brave enough to come back. Twice. First time when I shouldn't have. Second time when it counted. I'm glad you did. Both times, the simplicity of childhood forgiveness, offered without ceremony or conditions." Carson hugged her carefully, mindful of the baby, then grabbed his ball and sprinted back to where his father was attempting to explain the infield fly rule to Tyler with predictable lack of success. Ethan jogged over, slightly winded from chasing down Noah's wild throw. His company was thriving under restructured leadership that didn't require his constant presence. The board had eventually accepted that a CEO who left at 5 was still effective, possibly more so than one who burned out chasing impossible standards. Richard Chen had resigned, replaced by someone who understood that sustainable success required balance. "You look contemplative. Just thinking about timing. If your meeting hadn't canceled that day, if I hadn't been at the hospital when you came through, if Mrs. Foster hadn't taken a chance on someone with an impossible request. All the coincidences that were really choices dressed up as fate." Maya leaned into him, belly pressing between them, Emma toddling over with grass-stained hands reaching up to be held. Family wasn't what you're born into. They'd learned that the hard way. Family was what you built one brave choice at a time, from broken pieces that somehow fit together when you stopped trying to force them into conventional shapes. The boys called Ethan back to arbitrate some dispute about whether Noah's beetle counted as interference. Tyler was lobbying for a do-over. Carson was citing rules that probably didn't exist in actual baseball. Noah just wanted everyone to appreciate the beetle's iridescent shell. Maya watched her family because that's what they were now, legally and actually and in every way that mattered, and understood what she'd bought with $80,000. Not Carson specifically, though he was the catalyst, but this whole messy, complicated, beautiful constellation of people who'd found each other through loss and lies and love that refused to be contained by contracts. Michael would have loved this, she thought. Would have loved seeing that his little sister's sacrifice meant 3 boys got a mother, 1 man learned to be present, and a family assembled itself from ingredients that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. The oak tree stood witness as it had for a century, leaves falling like blessings, like promises, like proof that endings always carried beginnings hidden in their decay. 2 years ago, Ethan had stood outside this house feeling like a stranger. Now he was teaching his sons baseball badly while his wife watched and his daughters grew, and his life finally made sense in ways profit margins never had. People ask me how I balance a billion-dollar company with family. Ethan said it out loud, though nobody had asked. Truth is, I don't balance. I choose. I choose to leave at 5, to miss deals for soccer games, to be present even when it's inconvenient. He looked at Maya, at their children, at the life they'd built from less and loss and love that refused to quit. Because I learned the hard way that you can build an empire or a family, but only one matters when you're dying, and only one will remember you were there. Maya leaned against him, Emma on her lap, boys sprawled around them in the grass that needed mowing, and the yard that looked lived in rather than landscaped. The house behind them hummed with evidence of occupation, lights left on, dishes in the sink, laundry folded in baskets that would eventually make it upstairs. Imperfect, messy, absolutely everything. This is what I gave up $80,000 for. Maya's voice was quiet enough that only Ethan heard. This messy, complicated, beautiful family. Worth it? Every penny, every tear, every risk. The sun set behind them while the children played, while Emma learned to walk, while Noah drew and Carson laughed and Tyler told terrible jokes that made everyone groan. While 2 people who'd started as strangers, one selling a child, one buying the chance at fatherhood, became partners in the most important work they'd ever do, raising children who knew they were loved, building a family that chose each other daily, showing up even when it was hard, especially when it was hard, because that's what love actually looked like when you stripped away the easy parts in the fairy tale endings. Just presence, just choosing to stay, just being brave enough to trim on. The leaves kept falling, golden in the fading light, blessing the family beneath the oak tree with autumn's promise that every ending holds a beginning, that loss plants seeds for growth, that sometimes you have to give away everything to find out what you actually need. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, you get a second chance to do it right.